We are live now.
Hello, everyone. So today we are in conversation with Jay, who has secured All India Rank 5 in the recently concluded NLSAT 2024 exam. Firstly, I'd like to start with extending my heartfelt congratulations to Jay for securing this exceedingly great rank and making us proud. It's an exemplary feat that Jay has achieved, and we'd like to know a little bit of Jay's insights and reflections on this exam in this very brief discussion which we'll have with the Jay. Just a brief introduction of myself. I'm Hemant, and I'm one of the mentors with NLTI. And now we'll get to hear a little bit about from Jay about their educational background and what motivated them to pursue law, and what are the reasons to take NLSAT exam and eventually pursue law from NLS. So, Jay, handing it over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much and a very good afternoon. First of all, I would like to thank you personally because it has been your contribution has been a huge part in my prep journey as well. Even though I joined NLTI only around 25th of February and the exam was on 17th March, but whatever conversations I had with you or your inputs and insights, they helped me, fine tune or fine polish my preparation. So, just a little bit about myself. I graduated in 2022 and I'm a medical doctor now. So, since I graduated from a government college, I had to serve a bond period of 1 year to a government service. And I used to work as a teacher here at a medical college, teaching physiology to first year MBBS students. And I always had an interest in law. Even during 2016, when I first gave my NEET undergraduate examination, I had clandestinely also signed up to give CLAT exam. And I couldn't contribute as much because the preparation was pretty intense, and I had got NLU Assam at that time. So obviously, I didn't take that. I had a much better medical college, and obviously, I was interested in medicine, so I took a medical college. But that nagging urge within me of having something to do with law, knowing about law in general and how it affects our society, because we have a subject in our second year called forensic medicine and toxicology, and that has a lot to do with both forensic medicine as well as medical jurisprudence. So that got me again interested in law. And having one of my uncles in the Supreme Court, he just recently retired as justice. It was Justice M.R. Shah. He just retired last year. So that also had somewhat of an influence on me. And keeping that in mind, I had given my CLAT in November the previous year. And I did not get a very good rank. I had rank 150, but I wanted NLS Bangalore at any cost. So that was always the poll star which I had in mind, that if I want to do law, it has to be from NLS. And then I had given up because I had rank 150. Towards January end, I don't know, by God's grace, I got to know of NLSIU conducting a 3-year course, and then I googled for some institutes which would provide me, and then NLTI's name cropped up. And what attracted me to it is the legitimacy and the authenticity. Given that it's run by NLSIU students, I think it would give me an insider view, because much of what you would be telling me, I think subconsciously it might have rubbed off from the teachers who are teaching you about thinking critically, or writing clearly. So I took an LTI for the test series. I attempted all the 7 mocks, and I had a pretty decent score. But I think the main differentiator in this exam would have been part B, and that's where you guys helped, especially you, because I had only been in contact with you, and I'm grateful for that. So that's me in a nutshell.
So that was an interesting backstory to hear, Jay. Were you a working professional while you were preparing for this exam? At what point did you start preparing? Is more something we want to know.
Yes. So I am a working professional. I'm still continuing to teach at the medical college. So properly I started preparing from the time I joined NLTI. Before that, I had given CLAT in November. I had prepared for 2 or 3 months for that, and so part A was pretty much. I thought when I looked at the question papers, part A was very relatable, or it would come in very close relation to the CLAT papers. I did not find that much of a problem with it because I was used to solving MCQs. What was daunting for me is part B, because I had lost touch with writing subjective answers since a pretty long time, and that took me some time. So an honest answer would be yes, I had prepared it in 3 weeks or 4 weeks from joining, but considering the backstory, it would have been that I had been preparing for CLAT. and that's an important caveat. And the second thing is I was regularly reading newspapers, so it did not come, it was not that painful for me to sit and go through GK for a very long time.
Right. So you did have a fair amount of preparation as you were working side by side. Did you face any difficulty, or do you feel that if any other, because there is a fair bunch of working professionals who do sit for this exam as part of my own course, there are a bunch of people who are already working. So as a working professional, what would your advice be to that person? Do you think they need to manage their time, or do you think it's perfectly doable as alongside your job that you can also manage your exam preparation?
No, I would be lying if I would say that it's very easy go lucky and you can manage it with your job. It's not the case, and not to discredit any other stream, but being a doctor, you always have some calls, some messages sending you some reports, or some students sending you their queries. Since you are in a teaching profession, I was not much on the clinical side; I was more on the academic side. So it was tough managing both the responsibilities. But then I thought I gave it a deep thought, and I thought, why was it that I got to know about NLS, and that to the 3-year course, which was introduced just 2 years back? And maybe I had that gut feeling that I should give it my best try, because CLAT results were a bit of a disappointment, in the sense that it had been, from my perspective, they had been, it went extremely well, but when the marks came, because 2 or 3 questions I messed up pretty bad, and that had made all the difference. So this time I was prepared that I have to give much more, even if it means, in the typical terms, burning the midnight oil. So there were nights where I had to stay late at night, and given that I had only 3 weeks, it was I was giving 2 mocks every week approximately, and writing 6 questions, 350 words, again with an essay, analyzing them, analyzing parties. So that took a pretty much amount of time. But since I thought that, paradoxically, since I had less time, I thought, why not give it all? But I would not suggest that to anyone. I would suggest someone to be consistent throughout. I just got lucky. That's all I'd say.
And I hope that provide some sort of insight to anyone who's willing or who's watching this and wants to manage their time side by side. Now, moving into your exam preparation specifically for NLSAT, I think much of your part A you said that was already prepared as you were preparing for CLAT. How
Yes.
did you personally approach reading comprehension passages, and how did you manage to effectively manage your time? Because that is a huge challenge for many of the students. So, what would be your insights on managing the time in part A, and also making sure that you're able to complete your reading comprehension passages with an appreciable amount of accuracy?
Right. So I'm glad you brought that question out, because I had made some pointers regarding what I'd say, but part A questions, when I analyzed it, the previous two question papers, there were pretty broad themes which they had. One of the themes was in general Indian society, and themes related to maybe marriage, maybe caste. Then one was about democracy in general. The other was, some part was economics, some part was politics, some had international affairs, and inevitably there was at least one passage this year about science. So I had made a habit of reading editorials in general from that perspective, and analyzing them, that what does the author actually want to say. And when I got to the questions in part A, the questions also were pretty similar. They were like, which of the following options strengthens the argument? Which of them weakens it? What is the underlying assumption? If this is true, what necessarily has to be true? So, in that way, I would first read the questions. It might not work for many, but what I did was I first read the questions and just underlined the key questions, key phrases which were there. And then I went back to the passage, so that when I read it from start to end, if those key terms struck me, I could underline it there and there itself. So it took me relatively less time, because I thought that if I went to the passage, did all the questions, again going back, I tried that method as well, and that took me much more time. So I would first, underline those keywords, and then when I went to the specific part in that passage, I would read it much with much more incision or accuracy, and that helped me in part A, especially with regards to logical reasoning and the English comprehension part. GK is pretty unpredictable. My part A score this time was 65. It was pretty decent enough to get me in, but I had lost many of the 8 questions which I marked wrong. Majority of them, six or five of them, were of GK. And I was surprised that NLS this year had started asking constitutional GK as well. One was question regarding the amendment, which was made. One was with respect to the languages, which section or schedule of the constitution does languages fall into. So that requires a fair bit of knowledge. But in hindsight, I think many of these issues which were there, they were covered in newspapers. So now that I think if for somebody who's reading a newspaper, you should make a note of it, and you should either underline it, and if you have any digital form as such, you should make a PDF of it, or you should have a separate notebook. Oh, then that this explainer section of this newspaper, maybe it does mention that, and it has a probability of being asked. Because this year one of the question was with respect to the GST council. So who is it, who are its members? So I thought the next year there's a very high chance they might ask about election commission, because of the just concluded elections, that who are the members of it. And since the Supreme Court said something else, the government brought in something else, so that can be pretty close options. So that way you need to foresee that which questions can be asked, and prepare accordingly. So that was my strategy with respect to the party, the three sections of party.
So one important takeaway from Jay's approach we can understand is that uh, it's an unconventional way to first go through the questions and then read
Yeah,
the passage, but it also reflects that while giving your mocks, one should be open to having multiple strategies at their
of
disposal
course.
and not any one single strategy, because you never know what might work for you. So one should always be open to experimenting and strategizing with
Yeah,
different tools at your disposal. Now, if I could probe you a little bit more on the GK side, given that the GK can be a little bit
yeah,
unconventional in this exam, how
yeah,
would you suggest anyone to deal with the questions which are difficult to even anticipate in the exam to begin with? Questions, the one that you just highlighted about GST Council, many of the candidates may not even think about that such a question could come in.
yeah.
So, what would be your suggestion to someone to now prepare for GK with not having that much idea of what can be possibly asked in the exam? Besides covering the newspaper and all the broad grounds of GK, what to do
Right.
with those difficult questions, unexpected questions in the GK? How did you personally approach them?
Right. So there would be, it's a given that there would be a certain amount of questions, around maybe seven, 5 or 7 on an average, which no one is expected to know. I'll just give you an example of the passage on medicine, because that's the field I come from. And it was taken from the foreword of a book, When Breath Becomes Air. And I had fortunately read that book. And reading that book, I knew who the foreword for that passage was. Then one of the questions was regarding, if a doctor has a claim of medical negligence against him, he'll be imprisoned for so and so. So which of the act of the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita does it, which act does it fall into? So it was Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita. So there was certain questions which I do feel privileged or lucky, because I didn't anticipate that such questions would come. Having a specified amount of knowledge and the same amount of knowledge being tested is, it's chance at first. So regarding that, I'll be very honest. I was not anticipating such good marks in GK, but I got into that. And secondly, for someone who's preparing GK right now, I would say that not only reading newspapers, but you have various monthly compilations. So I had the Indian Express compilation, which was there with me, and starting from September until January. So I read the entire compilation, and it would give me broad themes. And at the end, there were certain questions as well from GK, which helped. And there are various news analysis discussions on YouTube. And I personally was, watching some of the analysis sessions by An Academy English, because I thought they were of a very high quality, and that kept me, in touch with all the questions. For example, I'll just give you two more questions. One question was, what does our Prime Minister Narendra Modi think of GST in general? So the answer was cooperative federalism. So it was one of his speeches, which was carried in a newspaper, that the Prime Minister says that this is cooperative federalism. Udayanidhi Stalin in Tamil Nadu, he says that, he said some things about Sanatan Dharma, and that was also a question. So you need to be aware about all the major political personalities, judicial personalities which are there, what their views are on certain subjects, and just keep in mind that it's a good to know kind of thing. I didn't practice as such for it, but I used to, daily go through the analysis which was done by other people as well, in addition to reading the newspaper. And I think that helped me stay in good stead.
So I think the important takeaway is that you should, at least now that you have the benefit of time, almost a
Yeah.
year to prepare for this exam, it would always be beneficial to just be in consistent touch with these newspapers and opinion pieces and other sources. And you may not need to devote a lot of your time, but just a
Yes,
consistent amount of time, if you're able to devote, that should be more than
that's
enough
true.
for you to get a good preparation for GK. Now, moving on to part B, Jay, something that you wanted to speak about and a much more interesting aspect of this paper because you don't see that being asked in majority of your competitive exams. So, what are your reflections on Part B? I think we can start with uh, the reflections on this year's paper Part B questions. What did you feel about them? And what is something that you have observed about Part B, which you would want other candidates to know as well, especially when they are mentally preparing themselves to attempt such questions? What are some of your observations on Part B questions from this year's paper?
Right. So part B is perhaps, I think, uh, the thing which stands out the most for NLSAT because it's the subjective part and it's only been 2 years since this exam has started. So part B, if anyone has gone through some of the sample questions which NLSIU provides itself, they have a certain set of facts which are given in certain questions, or in other questions they give you a line of thought that this is the law, and then they give you a certain set of facts that you need to apply. So what I found was that they are expecting answers to the length, like the upper limit is 350. Even in lesser words, you can obviously convey your point across. But it's very unconventional because you need to prove that why a particular thing is right or isn't right, and then you need to justify it for that with the limited amount of information given. So unless you put pen to paper, unless you write about it, you won't be able to you won't know exactly what you're thinking of. And in that sense, I think writing helped me a lot. For example, in cases of there were questions on for example, a question on negligence or a question on PCP NDT Act. So now in forensic medicine, we would always read about PCP NDT Act, and I was fairly aware of what that act meant and what that act did not encompass. So I chose a side. I reflected upon, and then I wrote the answer about it. But the point I'm trying to convey is you need to think of it from both the sides. Stick with the side which you believe in, engage in conversation with the other side. It is just like defending something, maybe, or justifying something to your group of friends, that why do you believe in that. Because if this is the moral dilemma or the situation which was given, for example, this year's question, one of the questions was regarding international cooperation and vis-a-vis the issue of public health rights. And then I felt that maybe in the balance of power, the public health rights triumph over the company. So why do I think that? And what are the arguments which I write in support of it? So maybe there was a scientific institution with which buttressed those claims that yes, this is harmful to the public. So there are various nuances which you need to think of. So the nuances is which is a greater good maybe, or which follows logically. So things like that, and that I'm not sure if I was able to convey that properly, but I think I get across my point.
I think that that is quite helpful because being able to express what you think is the most
Yeah,
important part in part B. Because what an examiner or in which assessor is looking at is if you're able to showcase your own points, your own
yeah,
expression in sufficient detail, then they're more than happy to see your points, and that is an important part of part B, answer writing. Jay, what would you have a suggestion for somebody who's trying to come up with more points to write their part B answers? What is an essential checklist, if I were to ask you that this is a checklist that you have to make for part B answer writing, which would also include reading the question of the part B? So, what would be some of those important ingredients of the checklist that you would suggest that one should keep in mind as they're approaching or writing a part B answer?
right. So, in the heat of the examinations, when you are there and you only have around 75 minutes or 70 minutes maximum for part B, and you have 6 questions and one essay, there's not much time to analyze. So a prerequisite would be solving a lot of questions beforehand, so that certain words or certain terminologies come naturally to you, right? So when you are reading a part B question, first you should understand and keep in mind all the facts which have been provided, a stance which you take, which facts given in the passage support it, which facts maybe don't. But even if they don't support them, the facts which don't support your assertion or your thinking, how do you engage in a conversation with those facts, and then you go about it. So I think, there have been two approaches. I happened to look at the YouTube video of AIR1, and I think she has a phenomenal Part A score. She has 47.5. I just got 35. I think her insights might be more valuable. But there are, from what I have understood, I think there are two approaches. One is you directly go for the conclusion first, that this is what you believe in, and then you start justifying. The second is you put forward what are the issues concerned, then you go step by step, building upon it, and then conclude at the end. Either way, it's your choice. I'm not sure if what NLSIU expects in general, but it does expect that you engage in the points of the other side. You don't outrightly reject them. So that's one of the thing. You don't have to be uh, sticking to your point of view, but you should also engage in the other point, so that you will have a convincing or a more persuasive answer. That's the whole point. I think they want us to know that whether you are able to consider the situation from all the aspects, also from the other aspect, and then come to a conclusion which you believe in.
That takes me to another important part of the paper, which is time management. You highlighted that there is a very little time to reflect on what the question is asking. There is a lot of hurry in the paper as you're writing it. How
Yeah.
did you personally manage your time? Were you able to finish this year's paper on time? If yes, then what are some of your strategies that helped you do that? And if you were not able to finish the paper on time, what do you think in retrospect you would have wanted to do additionally in your preparation to make sure that you're able to manage time in this paper?
Yes. So the answer to your first question, no, I was not able to complete my part B on time. I wrote three questions pretty well, two questions just okay, and one question I just couldn't attempt at all. And I had the essay at the end, which was of 15 marks. So I before entering the classroom, I knew that around 5 minutes or so, or 7 minutes or so, would go in, circling or signing the attendance and the other formalities which are there. And I had decided that I would separately dedicate around 75 minutes exact to part B, even if I have stopped at part A at a particular question and I know that I have 75 minutes left, I would go for part B. And once I started for part B, I wrote three questions, which I was, sufficiently convinced of, and then I had only 30 minutes, and then the panic set in. And I thought that leaving an essay would be more harmful than leaving a 10 marker. And the essay, again, fortunately, it was something in news for a very long time. I think one of your mocks also had it. One was regarding climate change, the differential responsibilities of various nations to climate change. I was pretty sure about that, so I went about writing that thing. And I had only 10 minutes and I had two questions left. I could just complete one, I couldn't complete the other. And like you said, hindsight is always 6 by 6. So this exam, more than anything, is a time of your endurance, and how do you complete all the behemoth information which you have in a set amount of time. So that's the thing. For part B, I think a fair amount would be around 10 minutes per question. You put a timer and then you write, even in mocks. Because for the first mock I gave, my time crossed around 3 hours and 3 hours 15 minutes or something. Even I had beautiful answers, wonderful answers, but when I thought, what about in exams, I knew that it would not fetch me good marks because I would have left something. And then the later mocks, the last two or three mocks I gave, I set a timer, and I used to just ferociously scribble through the paper. My handwriting wasn't that good, but I thought that even in less words, if I was able to convince, I would stop at that. I would not add more sentences, because earlier I thought that 350, the more you write, maybe the better arguments you would have. But with time and with practice, I realized no, I could convey the same amount of meaning in few words as well. So it doesn't matter that you stick to the word limit as such, but you need to stick to the time limit. If not the word limit, at least the time limit, and that's around 10 minutes. 8 to 10 minutes per question. I would not suggest more than that.
So that's a really important aspect of the paper that you're able to finish it on time. It can make a huge difference. A lot of the students who make through this exam
Yeah,
are usually the ones who were just able to finish this paper, which can be the
true.
differentiating factor at the end of the day. So that's something really important. Onto the one final thing now about the essay, how you feel that you approached your essay in this exam, and if you are short on time, especially because essay is towards the end of this paper, by
True.
which time you already know how much time you have left with you, and you might be at the peak of your panic stage as well. So there is a lot of pressure on you when you're writing your essay. So how do you manage to calm your nerves, approach your essay, manage to write a decent enough essay to fetch you marks? So in that situation, how did you manage to do that?
Right. So, like I said, by the fag end of the paper, you're already in a panic state. Your adrenaline rushes in. And I have hyperhidrosis, so my hands start sweating ferociously. So, I think, and I did ask you that question as well. And I think I'll stick to what you said then. And that any essay which you start with, it should have an introduction, it should have a main passage and a conclusion. The subtitles need not necessarily be introduction, the content and then conclusion, but it can be, for example, this year's essay was on climate change. So climate change, I started with a quote, and it was a pretty famous quote that we are on our highway to hell with a foot fairly or on the accelerator, and that was given by the UN Secretary General. So it just clicked me all of a sudden. I think that would be a good start to any essay which you have. If you could start with a quote, if you could start by paraphrasing someone, that would be good. You could give a brief background and just write 2 or 3 sentences about what that topic actually means, or what has been some context regarding it, or why this has been important. Then the middle part or the middle section is just like, I think, any of the legal questions which you have. You need to explain, because the questions are always evocative or provocative. They ask you to subtly choose one side, even in the essay. So you write about that why certain countries should share more responsibilities and certain countries should not, who have been historical emitters and things like that. And towards the conclusion, your conclusion should be more towards convergence. There should be an end point to it. You should not leave it open ended. Even if your content is less, it doesn't matter. But you need to conclude it saying, something towards positivity, something which aims towards cooperation. And it should not look like your essay is despondent, that perhaps there's no hope. I think so that subdivisions into 3 parts, starting with a quote, preferably if you get to know one. If you even if you don't, it's okay. But at least 3 or 4 paragraphs, just writing it through and having those subtitles helps. It gives an impression to the examiner that maybe you have thought of it in a way, or you have some structure at least in mind.
So thank you for that, Jay. So one last question now. How did you feel that NLTI helped you with your prep, especially with respect to your mock tests? And what difference did that make to your prep eventually as you gave the exam? And what are some of your takeaways from our coaching, from our mentorship that you were able to benefit from? Uh,
Yeah.
any reflections that you may have on that? We'd be happy to hear them.
Sure, sure. So, like I said, I joined on 25th of February and my exam was on 17th of March. So, I had close to 3 weeks. And part A was more of self assessment. So, I would, give my mocks, time it, and then self assess. If I had any doubts, I would either post it on the group or I have messaged you many times personally. And you have found your time and then you have replied to it or you have justified it. Sometimes, even in live sessions, you have told about it. So, I think that helped. That gave me a perspective as to where I was wrong, because preparing can at times be a very lonely journey where you do not know whether your line of thinking or your frequencies match what the examiner wants in that exam. So in that way, NLTI helped, because part A, even if there were explanations given for some questions in section A, I was not pretty sure if that was the line of thought which I had, and I could clear it with the help of the mentors, and I had you. For part B specifically, part B has been very diverse. And one of the things which I learned from those mocks is, oh, you could have equally cogent, constructive, and compelling arguments for the other side as well. And that thinking was something which totally wowed me. I was not very aware. I always had black and white kind of thinking, but that helped me think about areas in gray. So for part B, I think the answers which you provided, the model answers which you provided, which had mentions of both for and against, that helped me a great sense to improve my thinking, and some of the key words as well. Now I cannot think of them right now, but those are stock words which you have, and those you can use in multiple ways. So even on the day of my exam, I had my iPad, and I had all those PDFs of part B answers, and on my way I used to just go through those answers oh, so how do I frame it well? How do I use prepositions well? How do I use the conclusion well? So that's how it helped. So in that way, I've been tremendously grateful to you, Hemant, in particular. So thank you so much.
Thank you for your kind words, Jay. We're more than happy that we were able to help you in this preparation journey. Thank you for sharing your time with us today and getting in this conversation. I believe we had a lot to learn from your reflections, and I believe anybody who's watching this would have immensely benefited from your learnings and takeaways from this exam. And I believe they should be able to guide their own preparation strategy based off of your learnings.
Yeah,
Thank you once again, and we'd like to congratulate you once more for securing such a great rank. We are more than excited to see you on campus, and we hope your experience on campuses are just as enriching and just as fruitful. Thank you once again, Jay. Wishing you the
yeah,
best of luck.
yeah. Thank you so much, and it was great being with you, and I loved it. Thank you.